The signal the desert of Threx burned like molten copper under two suns. The air shimmered, heavy with dust storms that swept across jagged cliffs. Out here, survival wasn't about strength. It was about endurance. And no one endured better than the broken ones. Jace Miller was one of them. Ex-soldier, ex-mechanic, ex-humanity, anything. He had walked away from Earth's wars decades ago, signed a contract with alien traders, and wound up here on a forgotten mining colony at the edge of the Orion Reach. His only companions were rusting machines, broken tools, and the scars on his arms that told stories no one asked to hear. The locals, the Threxian clans, didn't like him much. They called him Iron Ghost because he spoke little, kept to his machines, and seemed to live halfway between flesh and scrap. But that changed. The day he heard the cry dot, it wasn't a voice in the desert. It was a broadcast. A faint, desperate signal on an emergency channel long abandoned by traders. Jace picked it up while tuning an old receiver in his workshop, the static breaking apart into fragments of a terrified plea. To anyone who can hear. "This is Shira of Clan Velar. They've taken us. The Korth Dominion is please. Gods, help us." The signal cut off. Jace froze. He hadn't heard desperation like that since his soldier days. And desperation had a sound. It didn't lie. The Korth Dominion. Even out here, the name carried weight. Raiders, slavers. They moved in like locusts, stripping colonies bare and taking lives as tribute. No one stopped them. No one dared. Jace leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. He should ignore it. He wasn't a soldier anymore. Not his fight. Not his problem. But something in the woman's voice, the crack when she said, "Please," cut into him. For a long time, he sat in silence, staring at the dust storm outside his window. Then, with a heavy sigh, he stood. His hands moved with mechanical certainty, opening crates he had sworn never to touch again. Inside were weapons wrapped in oilcloth, battered armor plates, and a rifle older than half the colony. Human make. Earth steel. Things he had hidden, because reminders hurt too much. But the cry wouldn't leave his head. Jace powered up the old freighter he kept in the canyon. The ship was a wreck barely holding together, but it could fly. Maybe. If the winds didn't tear it apart first dot as the engines roared to life. The desert clans gathered to watch, their tall, insect-like frames tilting their heads. No one left Threx. No one risked the Dominion's patrol routes. But Jace Miller did, because one cry for help was all it took, and he was going to answer. Asterisk, the prison ships, the Dominion's prison convoy, cut through the black like a scar. A cluster of frigates, rusted and patched, surrounding massive slave haulers shaped like knives. Jace stalked them from the shadow of an asteroid field, his freighter's systems barely holding together. He had no stealth tech, no cloaking field. Just cunning. Just human stubbornness. Inside the haulers were hundreds of captives, miners, farmers, children. And among them, maybe, the voice he had heard. Crazy bastard, Jace muttered to himself. His hands trembled as he prepared the boarding clamps. One ship against a fleet, but humans had a saying, hit them where they don't expect. He targeted the weakest hauler at the convoy's edge. Engines sputtering, shields thin. Dominion crews grew careless when they thought no one would dare oppose them. Jace's freighter lurched from the asteroid's shadow, engines screaming as he dove. Plasma fire lit up the void, the Dominion frigates reacting too slow. His ship clamped onto the hauler's side like a barnacle. Explosions rocked the hull. Jace grabbed his rifle, pulled on his battered armor, and forced the airlock. Metal screamed. Atmosphere vented. And then he was inside. The Dominion soldiers scaled, hulking brutes with tusks of bone, turned too late. Jace's rifle barked, and two went down in bursts of red. The rest charged, claws flashing. JACE fought like a machine. Short, precise bursts. Grenade tossed into cover. Knife to the throat when the ammo ran dry. He wasn't fast. He wasn't young. But he was efficient. And efficiency killed. When the last soldier fell, Jace's breath came ragged. His armor was scorched, his arms trembling. But he was alive. The prison cells were worse than he imagined. Metal cages stacked high, aliens of all shapes crammed together. Thin, broken, terrified. Some flinched at the sight of him, expecting another tormentor. Then one stepped forward. She was tall, insectoid yet graceful, her carapace cracked and bleeding. Her eyes glowed faint gold. She was the one. The voice from the signal. Shira of Velar, she whispered, her voice shaking. You heard me? Jace nodded once. I did, and in that moment, something shifted. The prisoners looked at him differently. Not as a tormentor, not even as a savior, but as something terrifying to their captors. An answer. Then the alarms blared. The Dominion frigates had locked weapons. Asterisk. Escape through fire. Jace's freighter couldn't outrun a fleet. Not in open space. He knew that. So he didn't run. He dove. Straight into the asteroid field. Plasma fire shredded rock around them as Dominion frigates pursued. The freighter's hull screamed, warning lights flashing across the console. Jace's knuckles went white as he pulled every trick he knew, slingshotting around asteroids, cutting engines to drift, restarting at the last second. Inside the cargo bay, prisoners clung to each other, the ship rattling like it would tear apart. Shira forced her people to stay calm. She could see it in the human's eyes when she went to the cockpit. He wasn't running. He was surviving. Every decision was precise, brutal, calculated. You're insane, she hissed. Yeah, Jace muttered, sweat dripping down his face. But it works. A Dominion frigate clipped an asteroid, erupting into fire. Another's engines shredded on debris. The rest pulled back, unwilling to lose more ships to one mad human and a dying freighter. When silence finally fell, Jace slumped back in his chair, chest heaving. Shira stared at him, awe and disbelief warring in her gaze. Why? She whispered. Why risk everything for us? Jace's eyes darkened. Because no one came for me once. I know what that feels like. Before she could answer, a new signal cut through. A Dominion command channel. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping, and they were calling reinforcements. Asterisk. The choice the freighter limped through the void like a wounded animal. Panels sparked. Engines sputtered. Hull plates glowed red from near misses. But somehow, impossibly, it still flew. Inside, the air was hot and thin. The smell of burning insulation clung to everything. Jace leaned against the cockpit console, sweat soaking through his undersuit. He had patched 3 coolant lines with tape and a prayer. The ship wasn't spaceworthy anymore. It was just surviving. Like him. Behind him, the cargo bay was a chorus of frightened voices. Dozens of species, all crammed together, murmuring in fear. And among them, Shira of Velar stood tall, her cracked carapace smeared with dried blood. Her golden eyes burned as she watched the human who had saved them, who might yet doom them all. Because the Dominion was coming back. Jace had heard the traffic. Reinforcements were en route. Bigger ships. Carriers, destroyers. Not the sloppy slavers he'd just outmaneuvered, but real military force. And his little freighter didn't stand a chance. Asterisk. Shira entered the cockpit, her steps clicking softly on the scorched floor. She studied the blinking warnings on the console, then turned to him. How long until they arrive? Jace didn't look at her. Hours, maybe less if they burn engines hot. And when they do? He let out a bitter laugh. Then we die. Or worse. The silence stretched. Shira finally spoke, her voice low and tight. You knew this when you came for us. Yeah. And why? She pressed. Her mandibles trembled with emotion. You risked everything to free us, yet you sound ready to abandon hope. Is that what your people are? A spark and then nothing? Jace finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, shadowed by years of scars, both seen and unseen. My people are stubborn, he said softly. But we're not invincible. I can't fight a fleet with a rust bucket and a rifle. Not this time. Shira's voice sharpened. Then we fight together. My people are warriors too. You saw what the Dominion did to us. We will not go meekly back into chains. Jace shook his head. You don't get it. They don't care if you fight. They'll slaughter everyone just to make a point. Shira slammed a clawed hand on the console. Sparks leapt. Then give us the choice, human. The words hung in the air like a blade. For a long time, Jace said nothing. He stared out at the endless stars, remembering battles past friends burned, orders given, the silence after screams. He had walked away from war because he couldn't carry it anymore. And now, here it was again, clawing at him through the voice of an alien who refused to bow. He turned to her, voice rough. You really want the choice? Yes. Then you need to understand what it means. Fighting back isn't noble. It's ugly. It's blood and fire. People screaming for help you can't give. You think freedom is worth that? Shira's golden eyes never wavered. It is worth everything. Better to die free than live as their cattle. Jace stared at her for a long, heavy moment. And then, slowly, he nodded. All right, he muttered. We fight. The ship became a forge. Jace tore apart bulkheads, ripping free power conduits and scrap metal. He welded jagged plating into crude armor for the prisoners. He rigged plasma cutters into makeshift rifles, mining charges into explosives. His hands moved like they hadn't in years, like they remembered what it was to turn desperation into weaponry. Shira's people rallied under her voice. She trained them in formation, in courage, in defiance. Though weakened, half-starved, they straightened their spines when she spoke. The other freed prisoners, diverse aliens of different shapes and colors, watched the human work with awe and fear. His movements were precise, almost ruthless, as though he carried war inside his veins. One young alien, a small four-armed child, approached him shyly as he soldered wires. You fought them before? Jace hesitated, then gave a short nod. Did you win? His jaw tightened. Not always. The child blinked up at him. But you're still here. Something in those words struck him. He almost smiled. Almost hours later, the Dominion message came. A booming voice filled the comms, dripping with contempt. This is Commander Varn of the Dominion. We know who you are, human. We know what ship you stole, and what cattle you freed. Hear this. Surrender now, and your prisoners will be granted a quick death. Resist, and we will make them suffer for every breath you steal from us. The message repeated, echoing through the freighter's failing speakers. The prisoners looked at Jace with wide, fearful eyes. Some began to whisper, better a quick death than another cage. Shira silenced them with a raised hand. Then she turned to Jace. Well, what is your choice? Jace stared at the console. His reflection in the cracked screen looked like a ghost hollow, scarred, tired. He thought of Earth, of promises broken, of battles lost. He thought of the voice that had cried for help, the one that had pulled him from exile. And then, slowly, he lifted his rifle. We don't surrender, he said. Shira's mandibles clicked, a fierce smile spreading across her alien face. Then let them come. But the Dominion had one more card to play. Not another transmission crackled in this time. Not a threat, but a broadcast. A live feed from a Dominion world. On screen were cages. Hundreds of them. Filled with prisoners from other raids. Families, children. Dominion soldiers lining them up before execution pits. The voice of Commander Varn thundered. See what your defiance brings. Human. For every ship you resist, for every slave you steal, we will kill 1,000 more. Their blood is on your hands. The feed cut to static dot. The cargo bay went silent. Fear became despair. Some wept. Others cursed Jace's name. Even Shira's golden eyes dimmed. Jace stood frozen, his rifle heavy in his grip. His mind screamed at him. This was the trap. The Dominion knew his kind. Knew humanity's weakness. Compassion. They would use innocence as chains dot, and for the first time since this began, he didn't know if he had the strength to break them. Asterisk. Fire and ash the Dominion didn't wait long. Their reinforcements arrived in waves black warships, sliding from hyperspace like predators catching the scent of blood. Carriers, destroyers, escorts. Their hulls gleamed with cruel angles, etched with the bone-white insignia of the Dominion's warlords. Inside the freighter, prisoners pressed close to the viewing ports, their whispers tight with dread. They've brought an armada. We cannot fight this. They will burn us all. Shira raised her voice, slicing through the panic. Enough. Fear feeds them. Courage starves them. But even her words struggled against the sight of a dozen warships boxing them in. Jace stood at the cockpit, his rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes scanning the incoming patterns. His hands moved without hesitation, typing into the freighter's battered system, calculating trajectories, looking for the tiniest gap. But there was no gap. Not this time. They'll board us, he said flatly. Shira's mandibles twitched. Then we hold the ship. Jace's gaze flicked to her. You understand what that means? Yes, she said. It means blood. The Dominion wasted no time. Dropships launched from their carriers, streaking toward the freighter like black spears. Their engines screamed across the void. JAC. E moved fast. Everyone into the cargo bay. Now. He ripped open crates, tossing out weapons he had cobbled together. Mining torches turned into plasma cutters. Jagged pipes welded into spears. Explosives built from fuel cells. Crude, dangerous. But weapons all the same dot. The prisoners took them with trembling hands. Some were farmers. Some miners. Some had never held a weapon in their lives. But the fire in Shira's voice bound them together. You are not slaves, she shouted. You are not cattle. You are warriors of the void. Stand with me. Stand with him? Asterisk. All eyes turned to Jace, the human, the iron ghost. Jace chambered around in his old earth rifle and slammed the stock against the deck. The sound cracked like thunder. You want freedom? He growled. Then bleed for it. The dropships hit like hammers. Hull plating screamed as grapples tore into metal. Airlocks boomed. Explosive charges blew doors inward. The Dominion soldiers poured in. Hulking brutes with scaled hides, their armor jagged bone and steel. They roared as they advanced, shock batons crackling, rifles spitting fire. The freighter became hell. Prisoners fought with desperation, shrieking as they drove crude spears into armored throats. Explosives detonated, tearing clusters of Dominion soldiers apart in gouts of fire. Plasma cutters seared through flesh and bone. Jace was everywhere. His rifle thundered in precise, brutal bursts. He dragged wounded back into cover, shoved explosives into vent shafts, slammed armored giants to the deck with his knife in their throats. He fought like a man who had lost everything before and wasn't about to lose again. Shira fought at his side. Her claws tore through Dominion armor, her mandibles clacking in a battle cry that rallied her people. She moved with grace, despite her wounds, striking and vanishing, pulling her kin back from the brink, But for every Dominion soldier that fell, 2 more took their place. The cargo bay became a furnace of screams. Smoke thickened. Blood pooled on the deck. Explosions rattled the freighter as more boarding ships cleved on. Jace dragged a young prisoner back from the line, barely more than a child, his 4 hands trembling as he clutched a bent metal spear. The boy's eyes were wide with terror. "I can't," he sobbed. "I can't do this." Jace shoved a detonator into his smallest hand. "You can," he barked. "Because if you don't, they'll take you again." "You want that?" The boy's breath hitched. Then, slowly, he shook his head. His grip tightened on the detonator. Jace squeezed his shoulder once, then pushed him back toward the fight. The battle dragged on. Minutes felt like hours. The freighter groaned as Dominion ships ripped away its plating dot, and then silence fell. Asterisk a voice boomed through the hull speakers, cold and triumphant. "This is Commander Varn. Enough. You are surrounded. Your weapons are crude. Your resistance is meaningless. Lay down your arms or watch every last prisoner executed before your eyes." The fighting stilled. The prisoners froze. Even Shira faltered, her chest heaving with exhaustion, her claws dripping Dominion blood. Dozens had already fallen. Corpses littered the bay. Those still standing swayed on their feet, weapons trembling. Jace's chest rose and fell as he stared at the ceiling, jaw clenched. He could see it in their eyes, the breaking point. The Dominion knew exactly when to press. Shira looked at him, desperate. "What do we do, Jace?" Jace's hands shook. He could keep fighting. He could fight until his last breath. But then what? The Dominion would slaughter everyone. His stubbornness would become their death sentence. His rifle felt heavier than it ever had before. Slowly, painfully, Jace lowered it to the deck. "No." Shira whispered. He looked at her, his face hollow. "If we keep fighting, they kill them all. Every last one." "I can't." His voice broke, just for an instant. "I can't carry that weight again." Shira's mandibles trembled. She wanted to scream at him, to claw him, to force him to stand. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the ghosts of battles long past, the pain of lives already lost. He wasn't surrendering out of weakness. He was surrendering out of unbearable memory. One by one, the prisoners dropped their weapons. The Dominion stormed in, binding them in chains once more. Their laughter echoed through the ruined freighter as they dragged the survivors toward the dropships. Jace didn't resist when they bound his hands. He didn't move when they slammed a baton into his ribs. He only stared at the deck, jaw tight, rage simmering like a volcano beneath the surface. Shira, chained beside him, whispered harshly, "Why? Why let them take you alive?" Jace's voice was a whisper of steel. "Because I'm not done yet." The prisoners were herded aboard a Dominion carrier, their chains clattering in the dark. The freighter, once their fragile hope, was left burning in orbit, drifting like a dead star dot in the carrier's cell block. Jace sat in silence, his wounds aching, his mind burning. Commander Varn himself came to gloat. A massive brute in obsidian armor, tusks jutting from his jaw, eyes gleaming with cruel delight. Asterisk. "You humans," he rumbled. "Always so dramatic. One cry for help, and you think you can defy the Dominion? You've only doomed them faster." He leaned close, his breath reeking of iron. "I will make you watch as they suffer. And then I will break you, piece by piece, until your kind learns what it means to resist us." Jace met his eyes, unflinching. And in that moment, despite the chains, despite the blood, despite the looming shadow of despair, something burned in him. A spark. Because if he could endure, if he could hold just long enough, he knew something the Dominion T. Earth was listening. Asterisk. The gates of hell the Dominion carrier was a city of metal and cruelty. Its corridors stank of blood and oil. Its walls were lined with trophies' bones, claws, skulls of species that had resisted and been crushed. The prisoners of the freighter were thrown into cages stacked 3 high. Chains clinked in the dark. Whispers of despair filled the air. Jace sat at the edge of his cell, wrists raw from bindings. His armor and rifle were gone, stripped by Dominion scavengers. His body ached from beatings, but his eyes burned with something the Dominion could not strip. Across from him, Shira clung to the bars of her cage. Her carapace was cracked, her golden eyes dim. Yet still, she whispered, "We are not finished." "Tell me we are not finished." Jace met her gaze. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. "Not finished," he rasped. Hours bled into darkness. The Dominion began their spectacle. Prisoners were dragged one by one into the central chamber, an arena of steel where crowds of soldiers jeered from the balconies. There, Commander Varn made good on his promise. One prisoner after another was executed for all to see. Slashed, shot, broken. The survivors were forced to watch, their chains heavy, their cries echoing through the chamber. Shira pressed her face to the bars, fury shaking her frame. Jace sat motionless, jaw clenched, forcing himself to absorb every scream, every cut. He would not look away, because rage was fuel, and he was building a fire. Then came Shira's turn. Guards dragged her from the cage, her limbs bound. She thrashed, mandibles clacking, golden eyes blazing with defiance. The crowd howled for blood. Commander Varn raised his blade high. And at that moment, the stars outside tore open. The first sign was silence. The Dominion fleet had been broadcasting their executions. Across the sector, a beacon of dominance. But suddenly, comms went dead. Sensors screamed. Gravity waves rippled through space. And then the sky lit up. Dozens of ships emerged from hyperspace, not Dominion, not Scavenger, not Trader. Human. Earth. Single quotes S-Fleet arrived in formation. Steel gray hulls bristling with weapons. Carriers, destroyers, frigates, escorts. Their engines burned white hot, cutting across the void like swords. At the center of the formation, massive dreadnoughts unfolded like titans waking from slumber. Railgun barrels longer than city blocks rotated into position. Missile bays yawned open. Drone swarms spilled from carriers like clouds of steel. The humans had come. The prisoners gasped as alarms blared through the Dominion carrier. Soldiers roared in confusion. Commander Varn froze, his blade hovering above Shira's neck. Jace's lips curled, just slightly. "Hell's here," he whispered. The first salvo shattered the void. Railguns fired, and Dominion destroyers vanished in streaks of molten light. Carriers erupted as swarms of missiles punched through their shields. Human dropships screamed toward the battlefield, belching fire as they descended. The Dominion fleet scrambled to respond. Plasma batteries roared. Fighters swarmed. But Earth's fleet moved with brutal precision, every strike coordinated, every maneuver cutting through the chaos. The sky became a storm of fire and ash. Inside the carrier, panic erupted. Soldiers abandoned the executions, rushing to their posts. The arena shook as explosions rippled through the hull. Prisoners screamed, chains rattling. Jace rose to his feet. The fire in his eyes was no longer hidden. He met Shira's gaze across the chamber. "Told you." Not finished. Human dropships hit the carrier's hull like meteors. Explosive charges blew open airlocks. From the smoke poured armored figures, human marines in black exosuits, helmets glowing with HUD lights. Their weapons barked with thunder. Dominion soldiers fell in heaps. Breach secure. A marine's voice boomed through the comms. "Push through. Free the prisoners." The arena's gates exploded inward. Marines stormed in, rifles flashing, blades gleaming. Prisoners ducked as Dominion guards fell in showers of blood. One Marine massive, his armor scarred from countless battles, strode to Jace's cage. His visor retracted, revealing a weathered human face. "Sergeant Miller," he barked. "Command sends regards. You've stirred up quite the hornet's nest." Jace smirked despite the blood on his lips. "Took you long enough." The Marine tore the cage door off its hinges. Chains fell. Jace staggered free, fire in his veins once more. "Where's my rifle?" he growled. The Marine tossed him a weapon newer than his old one. Sleek Earth engineering. Jace caught it, felt the weight, and grinned. Now he was whole. The battle for the carrier became chaos. Human Marines cut through Dominion lines with terrifying efficiency. Grenades thundered. Exosuits ripped apart bulkheads. The Dominion, for all their size and ferocity, faltered under the storm. Prisoners rallied behind the Marines, seizing weapons from fallen guards. Shira fought at Jace's side again, claws flashing, golden eyes blazing. Together, human and alien carved a path of freedom through the carrier's heart. Commander Vaughn roared his fury, his massive frame cutting down Marines like insects. His blade burned crimson as he bellowed across the chamber. "Human, you think this changes anything? You think your Earth can stand against the Dominion forever?" Jace stepped forward, rifle steady, eyes cold. "I don't think," he said. "I know." They clashed man and monster gunfire against blade, rage against steel. The chamber shook with every strike. Outside, Earth's fleet pressed harder. Dominion warships broke apart under relentless fire. Fighters exploded in clouds of debris. Carriers cracked open, spilling burning wreckage across the void. The galaxy had seen human war before, but never like this. Never united, never unleashed. It is as if Earth had opened the very gates of hell. And through those gates poured demons of steel, fire and fury demons who had come not for conquest, but for vengeance. One cry for help had brought them, and they would not stop until the Dominion burned. End of Part 6. Cliffhanger. Earth's fleet has arrived, tearing the Dominion apart. Jace duels Commander Varn as chaos erupts around them. The galaxy witnesses humanity's terrifying wrath. Asterisk. What humanity leaves behind the chamber reeked of smoke and blood. Jace's arm shook as he pressed his rifle against Commander Varn's chest plate. The Dominion warlord loomed over him, tusks bared, blade still humming with energy. Sparks rained from the ceiling as explosions rocked the carrier. "You are nothing," Varn snarled. His breath was hot with rage. "One human. One insect. Do you think you've broken the Dominion?" Jace gritted his teeth. Not broken, but burned. He pulled the trigger. The shot tore through armor, through bone, through the black heart of a warlord who had thought himself untouchable. Varn staggered back, roaring defiance even as his knees buckled. His massive frame crashed to the floor, shaking the deck. Silence fell in the chamber. Prisoners and Marines stared at Jace, the scarred, battered human who had struck down the Dominion's monster. Shira stepped forward, her golden eyes blazing. She raised her claws high, voice ringing through the chamber. "Free!" she cried. "We are free." The prisoners answered with a roar, a sound that had not been heard in generations. The sound of chains shattering. Asterisk outside, the Dominion fleet was finished. Earth's warships swept the void clean, railguns pounding, missiles detonating in brilliant firestorms. What remained of the Dominion scattered into the dark, broken and leaderless. The galaxy watched through intercepted broadcasts. Worlds that had cowered under Dominion rule for centuries saw something they had never imagined. The Dominion retreating, fleeing, because humanity had answered one cry for help, and humanity did not come quietly. In the aftermath, the carrier became a refugee ship. Marines escorted prisoners to dropships, patching wounds, offering food and water. Shira moved among her people, touching their shoulders, whispering words of hope. Asterisk. Jace sat alone in the wrecked arena, his rifle across his knees. The fire in his eyes was dim now, replaced by exhaustion. His body trembled with every breath. A shadow fell across him. A woman in a gray officer's coat, an admiral of Earth's fleet. Her hair was silver, her face carved by years of command. "Sergeant Miller," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes softened. "You've caused quite a stir," Jace snorted. "I've been known to." The admiral crouched, meeting his gaze. "Do you know why we came?" Jace frowned. "Because you were listening." She shook her head. "Because you were listening. That's who we are. One of ours hears a cry for help, and they answer. No matter the odds. No matter the cost. And when they answer," she gestured toward the fleet outside, "we all answer." Jace looked down at his hands, scarred, bloodied, shaking. "I'm not one of yours anymore." The admiral's gaze hardened. "You're human." "That's enough." She rose, leaving him with those words. Later, on the refugee deck, Shira approached him. Her carapace was patched with medical sealant, her movements still stiff. But her eyes glowed gold with pride. "You saved us," she said simply. Jace shook his head. "We saved each other." She tilted her head, mandibles twitching. "What will you do now?" Jace stared at the stars beyond the viewport. The Dominion was broken, but not gone. Shadows still lingered in the void. Battle still waited. "I'll keep listening," he said. Shira reached out, her claw resting lightly on his shoulder. "Then you will never walk alone." "Not again." The fleet departed, carrying survivors to safety. The galaxy buzzed with whispers of humans who descended like demons, who fought like fire, who answered cries no one else dared to hear. On 100 worlds, slaves raised their heads for the first time. Tyrants shivered in their palaces. And somewhere in the void, Dominion warlords plotted revenge plots that would meet the steel and fury of Earth's resolve. Because the lesson had been carved into the stars, one cry for help was all it took, and when humanity heard it, they opened the gates of Hell. Asterisk.